So maybe we'll mind our P's and Q's for the moment, and then we'll be ready to go at 6. All right, we're at 6 o'clock. Steph, are you ready to go if I start the webinar?
Yes. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Stephanie Stewart, and I'm the Manager of Community Transportation for Grey County. Together, Bruce, Dufferin, Grey, and Wellington counties, in partnership with Saugeen Mobility and Regional Transit, are currently collaborating on a regional transit study. To support this initiative, the project partners have engaged Dillon Consulting to lead the study. Before we begin today's session, if you have any accessibility requirements we can support you with during the presentation, please note them in the chat so we can assist you. If you would like any of today's materials in an accessible format, please reach out to me and we will ensure they are provided in the format that is most helpful to you. On behalf of the project team, thank you for joining us today to learn more about rural transit. I will now turn it over to Dennis Carr from Dillon Consulting, who will guide us through today's session.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dennis Carr from Dillon Consulting, and I'm the project manager for this study, and happy to be here today to guide you through a bit of a workshop on rural transit. Now, just a bit of my background. I've been dealing with, doing transit planning for about 22 years now, working with both large cities, such as the City of Toronto, to large rural areas, to sort of small townships. And so I understand the differences about what it takes to plan a transit system between a very urban environment to sort of a large county environment. And the purpose of today's workshop is to provide a bit of that understanding to our participants today, to the counselors and the board members that are here, about what does transit mean? What does it look like within each of the 4 counties where we're undertaking this study, and also finally to get some of your input. So today we'll go through a little bit of a presentation about rural transit, and we'll sort of invite some of your comments, questions, and input at the end of the presentation. So with that, I'll move forward. And before we begin, I'd like to do a land acknowledgement. I'd like to acknowledge that we are joining together virtually from across Ontario, which is the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations, including the Anishinaabe, Cree, Haudenosaunee, Wendat, and Métis people. We also acknowledge the treaties that cover these lands and the responsibilities that they carry for all of us today. Since we are not all in the same place, I invite you to take a moment to reflect on the lands that you are on and the responsibilities we each share in reconciliation and respect. So again, the purpose of today's session is to first discuss the regional transit study, including its purpose. Then we're going to get into some more basics of Rural Transit 101. What are the benefits of transit in your community? what types of transit exist today, and even with those options, what are the mobility gaps and challenges of operating transit in rural area as we look at the feasibility of expanding the existing service? What are the types and levels of service that we're going to be considering as we undertake this study? What's suitable for a rural or transit environment that connects communities together? What are the typical costs and funding that you can expect? And also, we're going to talk about integration and governance. So the importance of having an integrated, seamless system and the benefits of having a unified transit strategy to achieve this. And what does the government structure look like when it comes to decision making? Finally, we'll pause and take some time for some discussion, for some Q&A. So in terms of the purpose of this study, this overall project is split into two phases. And the first phase is the study, which is to design and assess the feasibility of a unified regional transit network across all 4 counties. In doing so, or the type and level of fare strategy and cost structure with your existing transit service, whether coordinating efforts and sharing resources such as vehicles, technology, administrative functions will achieve greater efficiencies or improve customer service, and as well as the next steps for implementation. This first phase of the project also involves a significant amount of engagement. Through this engagement, we want to understand how the public currently gets around within each of the 4 counties, what they think of a unified regional transit network should look like, what are their priorities when designing a network, what is working well today with existing transit services, and what are some of the challenges that they're experiencing. And we're going to gather this feedback through various different approaches. We already have a community survey out in which we've gathered close to 3,000 responses, which is a significant achievement and shows the level of interest in transit across all 4 counties. We'll be conducting an employer survey as well as focus groups and stakeholder meetings with a number of different organizations across all 4 counties. And we've already conducted a number of in-person public meetings as well as a virtual public open house. And we'll be having another in-person public event on Saturday. So the point of all of this engagement is to help ensure that the plan reflects the needs of residents across all 4 counties. So this is our schedule. We started this project in October of 25, and we've been doing a lot of research and data gathering, as well as beginning the engagement process, which will continue until the end of January, early February. From here in February and March, we're going to be developing a draft plan, which we will bring back to the public in a second round of engagement, taking any feedback that we receive to revise the plan based on comments before we present to each of the 4 councils, as well as the board of directors for Saugeen Mobility and Regional Services. So that's just a rough schedule that we have. Finally, pending approval of the recommendations from phase 1 from each of the 4 councils, we'll proceed with implementation with a partial operating funding commitment through the Provincial Ontario Transit Investment Fund over a 4-year period. So that's a little bit about the sort of the purpose of the study and the steps that we're taking to undertake it. So now I'll get into what are some of the benefits of transit in your community. So why are we undertaking this study? Why is transit important in each of your communities? And when we undertake transit planning assignments, there's 4 key outcomes that we're trying to achieve: equity and access, environmental, economy, and efficiency. And I'll go into each of these in a little bit more detail. From an equity lens, the benefits of transit are substantial, particularly for those who have limited options to get around. It's critical to support independent living and aging in place, providing access to health care and reducing social isolation. So for those of you who have strategies in place to support your seniors population, and again, aging at home and aging in place, transit is critical to get around. Improve mobility options for youth, including being able to access jobs, after-school activities, education, providing better access to jobs itself. So when many employers come into the county, or each of the counties, they want to make sure that they have access to a larger employment network as well. So transit helps provide that access to those jobs that are out there, as well as supporting areas with limited transportation options. So we all know that within large rural areas, sometimes the places that you need to visit are not very close to you, and then it often involves very expensive taxi rides or relying on family and friends to get a ride. So provides that freedom and mobility to access the supports you need, the goods and services you need to continue to live within each of the counties. And just on the right of the slide, you'll see some sort of random stats regarding how each of the counties supports rent-a-year income units, a higher percentage of seniors that are in many of these counties, particularly in Bruce and Grey, which are above the provincial average, and supports on many of the strategic plans to improve access to healthcare services. One important point to note as well is, when we're dealing with an affordability crisis right now, the average cost to own and operate an automobile is about $10,000 a year. So if you think about if I can reduce one vehicle in my household, what that money could be used for just living in your community or affording better housing. In terms of economic benefits, transit provides visitors and residents with more access to businesses. So businesses that are struggling right now, having opportunities to access those businesses that transit options will help support that. Provides access to tourism activities, enhancing the local economy. It improves connections to employment, particularly in many of your counties that are looking to add jobs over the next 25 years. And it encourages, enables participation in the economy for more members of the population. So I mentioned before as well, even from an economic development lens, many employers, when they're choosing where to locate, access to a large workforce is one of their key criteria, and ensuring that residents have an opportunity to access a new business is also important. Transit helps support growth. So growing populations create a higher demand for transit, particularly focused on urban centers in each county, and a higher need to address local traffic and downtown parking issues. So each of the counties are growing. They're projected to grow anywhere between 32 and 49% over the next 25 years. And we know that, as you continue to grow, there will be a higher demand for mobility, particularly in some of the urban centers, and connecting rural residents to those urban centers. And for many newcomers that come from other countries where transit is available, there is that expectation that some form of mobility option will be there to get around. Finally, transit helps support the environment. With multiple people sharing a vehicle, you can start to reduce GHG from single occupant vehicle travel. This 6 to 7 boardings per hour equals reduced vehicle travel, it equals reduced GHG over single occupant vehicle for a large 40-foot bus. When we start to get into smaller vehicles, that number decreases. It also improves efficiency in the network with reducing sort of congestion, particularly accessing peak tourism areas, or high demand destinations or special events, and reduces requirements for parking, particularly in smaller downtowns where you're getting a lot of visitor activity as well. So there are lots of benefits of transit in your community. And again, this is a lot of the reason why we're conducting this study and trying to assess the potential. Now, in terms of the existing mobility options, transit does exist across all 4 counties, but there are also gaps. Now, before we get into understanding sort of what options exist, as we go through this part of the presentation, I don't want to just talk about the good of transit. I also want to talk about some of the challenges of what it sort of takes to implement the transit service. And transit is a lot easier to implement in a smaller rural area, smaller urban area than it is in a large county area, but it doesn't take away the need that residents have for mobility. And this need is reflected first on the need for long distance trips. Because rural residents often require travel outside their community to access services, places of employment, education, and medical appointments, there is that need to have that mobility option that gets you outside of your community. This typically translates into longer travel times, which can be difficult, particularly in the winter at night. And I just sourced a couple stats from all 4 counties from the census, the recent census. And through those statistics, anywhere between 11 and 36% of all commuters travel over 45 minutes to get to work, and 22 to 51% of them travel outside their county of residence for work. This is just for work based on the data that's available. There are other residents that also travel longer distances for school, shopping, and medical appointments as well. So this just demonstrates the need for that intercommunity travel to accommodate the needs of your residents. But there are challenges with rural transit. So the majority of people that live in rural areas have a car and use it for work. So we're not blind to that fact. And I'm using Guelph here as an example because it's a close by urban municipality that many of you may be familiar with. So when we looked at the same stats, about 84 to 87% of county residents are drivers and have a car compared to about 79% in Guelph. And that's pretty typical. If you move to a rural area, you're more likely to have a car than if you live in an urban area. Same with being a passenger in the car as well. And public transit use, about 4.5% of Guelph residents take transit versus anywhere between 0.1 and 1% across the 4 counties today. Now, part of that is due to the fact that there's limited transit options available, but also because of the high car ownership and the long distance of travel. But again, that market is growing for a number of people that cannot drive or just choose not to drive. With an aging population, seniors that lose their license or prefer not to drive at winter and night need that other mobility option. We have many youth that live in our communities that don't have a license or delaying getting a car either for personal reasons or to the high cost of insurance. That again, being able to participate in their communities is something important to them. And again, residents that can't afford that first, second, or third car in their household due to the high cost. Couple this with a growing population, even though we have a higher majority of car drivers or people that own a car, the needs are much greater for those who don't have access to a vehicle because there's fewer options available. So in terms of how a number of mobility options that currently exist, we have local transit service that exists in Owen Sound, the town of Blue Mountains, and Orangeville. And this services sort of the urban areas across the 4 counties. We have 2 intercommunity routes that operate, one between Owen Sound and Guelph through Wellington County, and the Grey Transit route between Dundalk, Sherburne, and Orangeville. That again, primarily connecting to jobs, employment opportunities, as well as the GO Transit network, but also providing those important connections between communities as well. Wellington County also has a county-wide on-demand service. It's well utilized, however, it's capped due to limited vehicle capacity because it's not as well coordinated with that GHOST or intercommunity route that travels through it. So there are some of these options that exist. Meaford also has a specialized transit service, and within Bruce and Grey County as well, Saugeen Mobility and Regional Transit also provide specialized transit for seniors and persons with disabilities, often catered to or primarily focusing on medical trips or other priority trips. As well, there's a number of community care agencies that provide community transportation for seniors and persons with disabilities, but these aren't used for everyday travel. And there's an eligibility criteria that comes with it, meaning not every resident has the capability of using all of these services. Bruce County operates Smart Commute with a carpool program, providing some options for mobility, and there are a couple of private carriers that provide intercommunity service to the GTA, but these aren't for everyday use, typically because of the high cost and limited schedules. So while we have service, there's also a number of mobility gaps in service and in service levels, as you can see here across Grey, Dufferin, and Bruce County. There's a number of communities that don't have access to a conventional transit service. And this is service that isn't required to have eligibility based on your inability to use conventional transit. And while Wellington County has their on-demand service servicing all residents, the capacity is limited. So, and for many residents, it becomes difficult to book a ride because there's a higher demand than there is supply, given the large geographic area it has to serve. So to summarize these gaps, I can summarize them sort of in four kind of areas. One is the corridor effect, particularly in Grey and Dufferin, where transit is limited to major highways along 10, 89, and 26, leaving communities that are a kilometer or more off the main road completely unserved. Within Bruce County, there's a gap. Despite having major employment hubs such as Bruce Power and tourism, Bruce County has no year-round public transit system connecting its communities. As I mentioned before, while Wellington is a model and has 100% coverage through the Ridewell on-demand service between Monday and Friday, the limited number of vehicles makes the service unreliable, and the Ghost intercommunity corridor that runs along Highway 10 does not run at times that are convenient for many Wellington residents. Finally, as a potential opportunity, we have Smart or Soggy Mobility as a potential partner here, but it's currently focused on seniors and persons with disabilities. So one of the things we're going to explore is there a potential to integrate with all passengers, but we need to make sure as we're doing that it does not reduce the level of service for its targeted clients. One of the other gaps that we're looking at is that while these services are in place, they're not always well integrated. And we want to understand what are some of the steps that need to be taken to help integrate service. These could include potential improvements such as reducing the need for passengers to pay double fares when they transfer between local and intercommunity services. Ensuring on-demand and community services are better integrated, as right now they're currently not. Creating some consistency in fares. Ensuring schedules are line up, because right now they don't always line up. And when you're making long-distance trips with infrequent services and you need to transfer, there's an importance in making sure the two services connect to limit the amount of time people have to wait. Services are not always searchable on trip planning tools. And so if you want to book a ride, you may have to search through several different websites. And accessibility features are not always consistent between the two services. So that integration is important as well. So what are some other challenges with rural transit? Why is rural transit, it's such an important piece of what we're trying to accomplish, but challenging to accomplish. So transit thrives best with higher density and close proximity. And in rural areas, particularly when we're looking at intercommunity routes that go between different settlement areas or urban areas, low density means that there are few people in close proximity to a transit route to collect a number of passengers and collect that revenue to offset some of the operating costs. The spread out nature of rural areas also makes it difficult to group people together, meaning even if we have an on-demand service, sometimes it's difficult to share a ride because people live far away. And many roads don't always have a pedestrian infrastructure, which makes it difficult to get to a stop. And finally, many county roads have high speeds and are not suitable to stop a bus. And so many times these key destinations often require long travel times. These are our challenges that we have to overcome when we're looking at rural transit. And you can just see here, again, using Guelph as an example because it's close by. I talk about density, and the graph here shows the density between Bruce, Dufferin, Grey, Wellington is well under 50 people per hectare compared to Guelph, which is about 1,600 people per hectare. So significant difference in the density, which is why rural transit is much more challenging. And we translate this into the actual ridership as well. And again, I said at the beginning, I'm going to present the good, the bad, and the ugly of rural transit because I want to make sure that you're informed of a decision. And so we know that in terms of the productivity of rural transit routes, the rides per hour is about 74% less than in a comparable urban area. Right? So we're not getting as many people using the service per hour. And a lot of that has to do with the spread out nature of the service, as well as the rides per capita, because we aren't investing as much in transit. And so, we're providing, we're trying to provide a good level of service, but we're getting less rides per capita because of it, about 90% less. And these are some of the realities, but it does not take away from the need for rural transit. And one of the lines I always like to end off with when I talk about this is in rural counties and communities, transit is not required by as many residents. We know this. We know more people drive. We know and because of the long distances that are needed, people are taking their personal vehicle more. However, for those that need mobility, they really need it, right? Because there's fewer transportation and mobility options available to them. And so it leaves people in these transit deserts where it's very difficult to live in their community, to age in place in their community, and to find employment in the community if they don't have a reliable mobility option. So just wanted to sit on that for a little bit about understanding that you're never going to get as many riders as you would in an urban area, but that need is great for those who really need it. Moving on to, and maybe Stephanie, I'm going to just pause for a second here and just want to make sure that there's no urgent questions in the chat. Otherwise, I can keep going in probably another 20 minutes or 15 minutes and I should be done.
That's right. Nothing yet.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So understanding the value of transit, the next piece of this presentation is how do we make a case for transit and what are the options that we're going to be exploring? So when we're conducting these studies and trying to understand the feasibility and how we design a transit service, there's several questions that we have to ask ourselves. The first is, what are your mobility objectives in each of your communities? So what are you trying to achieve? And that helps shape the service that we help design to meet your needs. Who are your target passengers? Are they workers? Are they seniors? Are they students? And what trip purpose are you trying to accommodate? Some counties and municipalities look at it from an economic development lens. They want to get people to places of work and tract industry. Other communities look at it from making sure their seniors are taken care of. Some of it is all over the place. So we want to understand sort of what you're trying to achieve. What kind of trips are you trying to accommodate as well? And that really helps us understand what level and type of service that we put in. And what days a week or hours of service are needed to accommodate those trips as well. And I'll get into each of these as we go through. So in terms of better understanding your need, one of the first things we look at is what's your current policy framework say? What are you trying to accomplish? So we took a look at each of your official plan documents, and tried to put some high level understanding of what are those broader strategic goals that you're trying to achieve as a county. And some common themes that we identified is promoting equity and well-being amongst residents, themes around sustainability, reducing sort of your environmental footprint, and also growth management as well, and recognizing that there are, population growth targets placed on your communities as well. So how do we make sure that as populations grow, there are mobility options available and people can get around? There are a number of myths and truths as we sort of go through this part of the presentation that I want to get into. The first is that there's a one-size-fits-all solution for transit. That's a myth. There's not. There's lots of different options available for how we design a transit service. And because land use is harder to change, we can't turn rural communities into urban areas to make transit work for a typical fixed route system. We need to adapt transit to fit the market and geography. So we will be looking at other transit options that are more suitable for a rural environment. The other thing we hear often is about diverting fixed routes. And sometimes, we design a route that goes from an origin to a destination, and we get a request to say, well, can you just deviate off that route a little bit to pick up another passenger? And that's easier said than done, because sometimes when you increase that length of route, you're inconveniencing a lot of people that are already on that bus. And so one of the decisions we have to make is the benefit of deviation of the people that we're going to pick up outweigh the people that we're inconveniencing that are currently on the vehicle. Sometimes it can lead to misconnections as well. So when we design a route, sometimes we design it to connect to a transfer point, such as a GO train. And so every time we add a deviation, it adds travel time, which may mean an extra vehicle or reduced frequency, or the route becoming unreliable and missing those important connections that people are trying to make. So there's a lot of science when it comes to designing routes and services. So I talked to you before about the different transit service models that we're going to be exploring as we go through this study, and I'll go through about 4 of them in a little bit more detail. These are already in place within the county. So the first is on-demand transit. And on-demand transit is a shared ride service that does not operate on a fixed route or schedule, but operates within a predefined service area and period where passengers must book a ride using a mobile app or by calling in. And a software is used to optimize ride sharing using a most direct service while also picking up other passengers along the way. So passengers must then get picked up at either a fixed stop or a virtual stop. So this type of solution is best suited for very low demand areas or periods, as well as for rural service where the population is spread out and it doesn't make sense to have a fixed route. So a good example of this would be the Ridewell service in Wellington County. Fixed route transit model is probably the most common one that you'll be familiar with. This is a traditional transit service that you see in most urban areas where passengers are required to walk or roll to or from a fixed stop, and the route operates on a predefined route and schedule without deviation. And this is best suited for high demand urban areas or periods of the day, as well as long distance trips that connect urban areas or urban settlement areas, but not as well suited for large rural areas where there's not a concentration of people or key destinations. So this is really about connecting the dots, connecting destinations. So GTR, the Ghost, Orangeville Transit are some examples. Specialized or community transportation is another type. And this is similar to on-demand or operates in a similar way where it doesn't follow fixed route or schedule, but there's an eligibility criteria that's in place for persons with disabilities that cannot use a conventional service and require accessibility accommodation. So there is that potential to commingle with on-demand, and that's something that we're going to explore. And that basically means an on-demand or specialized service can pick up both specialized transit customers as well as on-demand customers. The difference is the specialized customer will always receive a door-to-door trip, where the on-demand customer may receive a door to transfer hub trip, meaning I won't complete your entire trip, but I will take you to the closest transfer hub to get you to the rest of the way on your trip. Finally, there's ride sharing or carpooling. This is a solution for regular commuters. It's low cost to municipalities, but it's not always as reliable because sometimes it can be difficult to find a car share partner or carpool partner. So provide some options for individuals, particularly if they're going to work and they can find someone to go with. But if you need to go to a medical appointment, your ability to find that ride is less than if you have a standard public transit service in place. So this next slide just shows a summary of the different service types that we will be exploring as we go through the study, identifying the suitable operating environments and the typical ridership that you can expect per hour. So again, with on-demand, it's focused on low-density settlement areas or large rural areas. For fixed route in urban areas or intercommunity. For specialized, this can operate anywhere. It's mainly about accommodating individuals with disabilities, and for carpooling, it's mainly focused on getting people to and from work where there's a group, where there's a partner I can share a ride with. As we go through this, we're also going to be cognizant of meeting accessibility requirements that are outlined in the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act through the Integrated Accessibility Standards Regulation. And this addresses requirements for transportation service providers in Ontario, such as the need to ensure that there's opportunities for persons with disabilities to get a ride similar to a person using conventional transit. So this identifies needs for ensuring for specialized transit service hours are the same as conventional, fares are the same as conventional, there's an ability to book a same-day trip, and also identifying requirements to make the conventional service as accessible as possible. Now, one thing I want to stress is accessibility is important for all passengers. Okay, so having a good accessible service benefits everybody, and it's something that we want to promote. But we're also going to see that sort of increase in accessibility as the population continues to age, and there's a higher propensity of developing a disability as we age. So this is something that all transit systems look at to make sure that their systems are accessible as possible. Want to sort of state one thing that when we're designing a transit service, it's important. There are needs and desires that people have. Needs are things that people need to use a service and have to be in place, and we can't take shortcuts on needs. So to be able to use a service, so if you don't have a car and you want to use a service, you need to be able to access the service. That service needs to be within a 5 to 10 minute walk of where you live or where you're going. Or you must have the ability to have someone drop you off at a stop. But you need to be able to access that service in order to use it. That service needs to be available on the days and hours you need to use it. So if I'm working a shift work and my transit service is only available from 9 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock at night, that may accommodate my daytime shift, but if I'm transferring into an evening shift, I can't use transit. So then is that service useful for my work trip? Accessibility for persons with disabilities, active transportation infrastructure, etc. That service needs to be accessible. It needs to be simple, easy to navigate, technology and infrastructure. Do I understand how to use it? It needs to be affordable and financially feasible for all residents, particularly if I'm using it every day to access school or work. It needs to be safe with trained drivers. And as a customer, I need to feel secure on board a vehicle. And as a municipality, it needs to be effective, where operating budget is financially sustainable for the municipality. These are the needs of a transit service. There's also desires. So if I want to If I want to leave my car at home, I need to make sure that the service is convenient. It needs to be frequent enough to suit my needs. And the travel time needs to somewhat compete with an automobile. It needs to have good customer service with staff are friendly and helpful. There needs to be a culture of transit and it's being considered a viable options. And it needs to be equitable with the same level of service for everyone. These are all desires and things that we're trying to achieve when we're designing a transit service. One of the things to think about as well is priorities. And so if you imagine you have $100 to spend on a transit system, I can't accommodate everything I want for $100. So I have to choose. I have to choose what the benefits are to my community and what are their desires. And I'll just give you an example. Let's say $100 buys you a bus route. Okay. So I can take that route and I can have that bus travel frequently, right? I can have it travel every hour, back and forth, up and down the corridor. But now, if I want that service to operate later at night, I'm going to have to spend more than $100 to operate later at night. So then I might have to sacrifice that frequency. So maybe I don't operate as frequently to allow that service to extend later into the evening. So these are some of the choices that we have to make when we have a limited funding envelope. And the things that we consider are frequency and travel time, coverage. So, do we try to spread the route out and go to various different destinations, or do we stick to a main corridor and make it more frequent and more direct? What type of fleet we're using? Do we extend hours or days of the week, or do we focus our service on core hours? Do we spend more money on the accessibility of stops? The affordability, do we reduce passenger fares to make it more affordable, which means that there may be a higher cost at the municipal tax base? And also, how much money do we invest in technology for ease of booking and trip planning? So these are all factors that we have to consider, and they're priorities that we need to make and balance. The level of service must also match demand. And so when you're thinking about how we design a service, when I asked that question at the beginning about, what is our main purpose? What is our main intent? So if I'm designing a service to provide or accommodate the needs of, people going shopping or accessing medical appointments, maybe I just design that service or daytime workers, I design that service during the day when the highest travel demand is. But then I'm not accommodating my shift workers. And so if I want to accommodate my shift workers, I need to start extending those service hours. So these are questions we ask. Am I operating daytime only, 5 days a week? Do I shift to 7 days a week to accommodate weekend demand and shopping, etc.? Or do I do rotating? And if I do rotating and I just say, okay, I'm going to have this quarter go twice a week to accommodate grocery trips, that's fine. I can focus, but then I can't use that same service for work trips or school trips. So again, the level of service must match demand. So I'm now get into a little bit of transit finance. And again, back to myths and truth. So one of the myths is transit will pay for itself. Obviously, we all know that doesn't happen. There's always going to be a municipal investment required to run a transit system. Now, and this is no different than an investment that's made into roads, into libraries, sports facilities, and parks. These are all things that you as municipalities choose to invest in. And so think about transit as a means to provide your residents with access to the other services and facilities that you as a municipality invest in. And that's never going to pay for itself. It's always a community benefit that we provide to our residents to improve their mobility options and access. Myths and truths. Smaller vehicles always save money. That's also a myth. When you look at the breakdown of the average hourly cost of a transit service, there's 5 components. There's the facility that maintains the vehicles, there's the fuel, the administrative cost of people that run it, the vehicle maintenance, and transportation operations, or your driver. Your driver is the highest component of that hourly cost. And fuel is one of the lower ones. So even when we switch to a smaller vehicle, with the thought of saving on fuel, it's not going to reduce your cost as much. So what we typically do is we always right size the vehicle based on what that highest demand is. And sometimes, just because the way transit system runs, you'll see some of those vehicles running with fewer people on it during the off-peak periods. But that's no different than a road where, during rush hour, you'll see that road full. And, at 10 o'clock at night, it runs fairly empty. That road infrastructure stays the same. And we do the same when it comes to vehicles. We right size it based on that peak demand. This slide, again, compares some of the key performance indicators for transit in rural counties versus urban. And here we just took some stats from a couple of other counties outside of the four here that operate rural transit and compared it again. Guelph is a common theme here because it's close by to an urban system. So population fairly the same. You can see that variation in density with about an average density of about 44 persons per hectare versus 1,600 in Guelph. And again, what that translates into is a lower investment in service hours per capita. So in these four rural counties serving the same, just slightly lower population, they invest about 0.13 service hours per capita versus in Guelph, which is just under 2 service hours per capita. So a significant difference in the level of investment. And that translates into an also lower ridership per capita as well because of that lower investment and the larger service area that's required. Just half 0.55 rides per capita versus 41 in Guelph. The effectiveness of the routes is also a little bit lower, again, 4 versus 23 in terms of the boardings per hour. And as a result, the net cost per passenger in rural communities is going to be higher. And again, I don't want to, I never want to sort of sugarcoat and say that, this is going to be an urban style system. It is a higher investment per passenger, but because you're investing less, you're also investing less per capita, about $11 per capita in terms of a net cost minus passenger revenue versus about 160 in the city of Guelph. So significant difference in the cost per resident of investing in transit because of that lower level of service that you're investing in. So these are just some numbers, as we go through this study, we will do our best to try to find those efficiencies to sort of reduce the amount of municipal investment while also understanding that there's a certain level of service that's required to accommodate passenger needs and to make the service useful for residents. That's the slide where I had the needs versus desires and making sure those needs are met. There's also capital costs that are required to operate a system. Vehicles, now these can either be purchased or they can be leased. Or they can be provided by the contractor as well. So there doesn't have to be that capital investment. Now, one of the nice things about vehicles or capital itself is there's more government or senior level government programs available to fund capital investment as well. So there's that opportunity to get government funding to purchase vehicles. There's a facility that's required to store and maintain vehicles. Often, if the service is contracted or the contractor maintains in their own facility, there's some bus stops that are required. These are not big capital expenses, but it's important to make sure that these are accessible, have appropriate signs, and in sort of higher ridership stop having shelters and amenities, and some intelligent information technology that's required on board vehicles as well to ensure that it's running properly, fare boxes, etc. In terms of revenue, typical revenue sources transit agencies typically recover in rural areas anywhere between 10 and 25% of their operating costs through revenue. So that's one portion of which you can help offset some of the operating costs. The Ontario Provincial Gas Tax Program is available as well when you move out of stage and into a permanent transit that is based on ridership and population. Now, one thing that's important to understand is you don't have access to this gas tax program unless you have a transit service, because you can only spend it on transit. So this is based, so everybody pays into it. Every time you fill up your gas tank, you pay into it, but that money then goes to another municipality that has transit if you're not utilizing it. There's the Rural Transit Solutions Fund, which can be used for capital requirements. If your systems are growing, you can also use development charges for growth-related expenses or capital expenses for transit. Advertising can provide some level of funding, but it's fairly minimal. And obviously, the Ontario Transit Investment Fund, which will provide 4 years of funding at 50%, which we have been, the 4 counties have been approved for. In terms of setting passenger fares, there's a couple of different principles behind it. Again, what I mentioned before, it's only going to recover a small portion of operating costs. Again, no different than other municipal services such as libraries, recreation facilities that receive very little revenue from user fees. One of the principles we like to look at is making sure that we balance affordability with cost recovery. So these are some of the decisions and factors that we look at when we're identifying what the appropriate passenger fare would be. There's been a lot of talk about free transit, and while that increases ridership, it can also reduce your ability to add service. So that's just something to consider. Because that 10 to 25% of the revenue that offsets the operating costs may also be used in increasing the level of service. So then the question becomes, what's more important to your customers, free transit or a better level of service? One of the things that we look at when we're identifying what the appropriate fare is we compare it to minimum wage. And we say, if someone is going to work using transit and 1 hour of work, they get paid $17, then we start to think, okay, so what are people willing to pay to go to work? And if they get $17 an hour and a $10 one-way fare is equal to 1 hour of work, or sorry, a $10 one-way fare, that round trip fare, $20 is equal to 1 hour of work, is it worth them for take transit? So best practice is to keep fares reasonable and address affordability concerns through other concessions. Going to kind of finalize this discussion on integration and governance, and we'll move on to sort of any questions. So question now becomes, why unify transit? The unified transit that we're looking to identify creates a seamless passenger experience, including trip booking and planning. It can help limit transfers, create a consistent eligibility criteria, and create a unified fare structure. So there's a lot of passenger benefits to it. It also identifies efficiencies through collaboration and taking advantage of unallocated resources. So we're looking at potential, cost reductions with all 4 counties working together. The other advantage is it can create a unified voice for funding from senior levels of government. So instead of the 4 counties going separately to advocate for transit, coming together as one voice may help strengthen your position. And again, as I mentioned before, lots of benefits of integrated governance or transit from a passenger perspective. It provides a simpler experience, one source of information for trip planning, faster, stress-free transfers, more affordable trips, improve access to destinations, and improve accessibility. For the operator, it can provide optimized efficient resource allocation. Again, instead of having 4 on-demand contracts, you can consolidate into 1. Increase revenue potential with increased ridership, reduce planning duplication, fewer duplicated roles and staff, shared infrastructure and maintenance, and greater access to external funding sources. So there's benefits for both. So as we go through this, we're also going to be looking at different governance models. And three I've highlighted here: regional cooperation, shared service delivery, and a transit commission. Each of them have, different levels of local autonomy and integration. So for a regional cooperation model, this is where each partner works together voluntarily to enhance the integration led by one party, but still operating as separate systems. So there's enhanced local autonomy, but reduced integration. Shared service delivery, where a single operator technology provider with services agreed upon upfront. So one operator, but you're each in control about the level of service, only making decisions on things like the operator, the technology used, things that are sort of common. And then there's the transit commission, where there's more centralized decision-making through a commission structure, where the planning, service, and maintenance are done under a single entity that reports to each body. And this creates that highest level of integration to make decisions that benefit the entire region. So these are the three sort of models that we'll be looking at. And when we consider the governance structure, we'll be looking at things like who makes decision and plans the service, who operates and delivers the service and maintains vehicles, who owns and has responsibility over assets, and who funds the service. These are all aspects of governance. And as we get into this, some quick principles of good governance that we'll consider are the ability to deliver your regional vision for public transportation, so providing a clear direction and roles to deliver regional service. Representation and voice, it's reflective of the voice of the population being serviced. Transparency and accountability provides that clarity to decision-making process, including accountability of decision makers and constituents they represent. The efficiency enables cost-efficient processes that allows timely decisions in support of desired outcomes, and customer service enables decisions that focus on the passenger journey regardless of municipal boundaries. So as we sort of wrap up, there are a number of things to consider. When you're considering the potential benefits of regional transit, some things you want to consider include growth management, and how we reduce growing traffic congestion and improving commute times, aging in place, supporting access to shopping, medical appointments, and reducing social isolation, affordability, providing an affordable transportation option that reduces the percent of income on housing, engaging youth, increasing their independence and access to after-school activities, environmental sustainability by reducing greenhouse gas emissions, economic development, supporting businesses that are looking to locate in your community, as well as employment by supporting access to employment and training opportunities, road safety, achieving Vision Zero by providing a safe alternative to travel, and regional connections, particularly connecting to the GO network. In terms of our next steps, just to conclude, we have other engagement activities that are going to be happening. We have our last public open house happening on January 17th at the Mount Forest Arena in Wellington. Our community survey closes on January 25th, and as I mentioned before, we received close to 3,000 responses. And we're going to be completing our focus groups with employers, seniors, youth, accessibility, communities, and social services. Outside of that, other next steps include assessing mobility gaps, developing the transit plan, identifying the financial plan, reviewing governance models, and identifying steps for implementation, conducting the second round of engagement with the public and councils and SMART board, and finalizing recommendations and reporting back to councils and the board. So with that, I'm going to pause here, and Stephanie, I don't know if we want to sort of turn it over to any comments that may have come through, or if you have any questions about what was presented here today. But I hope this has provided you sort of a good summary of the need for transit in rural community and some of the challenges that we're going to undertake in trying to develop a system that is sustainable and works for a large rural area.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dennis. So we do have some questions. One has come through the Q&A and some have come through the chat. So if you'd like to pop them into the question and answer, that would be great. In regards to questions and things that may be asked today, if I do not raise your question, it is simply just because we just don't know the answer to that yet. We aren't able to get into the specifics of what may or may not happen within our communities today, just because we're still in that study phase. So when we come back to you all in March, we will be going to all 4 counties and also to the Smart Board. If you have any specific questions at that time relating to the materials we present then, we'll be happy to kind of engage in that greater dialogue about what things may look like in our areas. In regards to the questions we have right now, Dennis, the first one we have is if you can talk to things relating to your experiences in other places. With an integrated system, how does revenue splitting work? What kind of models and things are there out there for that?
Yeah, there's lots of models out there, and that's something that we have to kind of explore. Like there's models where you just accept each other's transfers. So if I'm making a trip one way, I take the fare, and if I'm making the trip back, the second system takes the fare. So that's one way of splitting the actual passenger revenue. There's technology solutions that are available as well that will allow you to identify what that split is. We want to keep that solution simple. We don't want to invest a lot of time and technology into it. As you saw, like passenger fares can, anywhere between 10 and 25%. So if we're off by a couple percent, it's not going to make a huge difference in the amount of revenue that you have to operate the service. And I think the bigger benefit is making sure that the customer has a good experience, which is going to increase the level of ridership and bring in more revenue. So we'll identify an opportunity or a sort of a model that shows that sort of fair split, recognizing the amount that you have to invest in that technology solution to get the accuracy you need, and making sure it works for the customer.
Wonderful. And similar to that, how about operating costs? How does that kind of work logistically from a large standpoint like this?
Again, everyone's going to be a little bit different. You can do it based on service kilometers, so the amount that route runs through your municipality, or service hours, or who you think the primary passenger base is. So for each route, we'll sort of identify who's primarily benefiting from the service, as well as which jurisdiction it runs through, and we'll sort of identify some options about how to make that split.
Great, thank you. The next question we have, they're similar. Can you provide some examples of other regional transit systems or other places that have done something similar to what we're hoping to achieve?
Right now, the one I can think of locally is Southwest Community Transit, which Grey County was a part of, as well as Wellington County as well. And that's sort of a accumulation of, I think there's 8 counties that all agreed to come together to help make sure that their services are better integrated. So that represents that one governance structure about regional cooperation. And so they achieved some things in terms of, getting transit all on one website, so the, passenger did not have to go through multiple websites to plan their trip, helping integrate some stops and making sure that they're connected better together. But they didn't achieve the level of integration that sort of something like the region of Waterloo is with their Grand River Transit or Niagara Region Transit, which just amalgamated and formed a single transit entity, where there's a much more seamless passenger experience anywhere you travel within all of the lower tier municipalities in that region. So that's just an example of sort of large rural county region and one end of that spectrum. And I guess Niagara Region or Grand River Transit would be an example of sort of a commission type structure.
Perfect, thank you. I don't see any other questions, but if there are any other questions, if you'd like to pop them into the chat or the Q&A, we'll leave some more time for that. I do see that Joel has asked a question, and I think that that's one of those questions that we will get back to at a later date, just because we just don't have those details quite yet. Okay. Well, if there is nothing else from everyone here, I just wanted to thank you again for joining us today, and for taking the time to learn more about rural transit. Your participation is greatly appreciated as we work together to improve transportation options in our communities. As a follow-up from today, we will also be sending out the slides. We have a counselor survey, so if you want to share, some of those details or some of those questions that I wasn't able to answer today, if you want to jump into that survey, let us know your thoughts and opinions in there. That would be greatly appreciated. Additionally, for those who weren't able to attend today, we have another session on January the 29th. If someone would like to join that one, they can. And also, this has been live streamed on YouTube, so people can watch it at a later date. And anyone of our counselors, local level or county level, and the Smart Board is welcome to do the survey even if they didn't attend today's session or the following session. Again, the survey doesn't necessarily inform what will happen or what will be in the final plan, but it really just helps us better understand what you're thinking and what some of your constituents are thinking and how we can guide the plan. We look forward to speaking to you all in March. And if you have anything that you think we've missed or engagement opportunities or someone you think that we should talk to, please feel free to email me. Again, I'm Stephanie Stewart from Grey County. So my email is stephanie.stewart@grey.ca. And we'd be happy to chat with anyone and everyone who wants to share their thoughts and opinions on transit needs in our community.